Hey, Teddy K here for the Best Buy blog, and in this video we are taking a look at the Samsung Galaxy Watch 7. Available at Best Buy now, Samsung's latest smartwatch largely looks the same as before, but adds a couple new things. There's a lot of familiarity in this watch, as you might expect, and we're going to take a closer look now and see what you could expect from it. I don't have the Galaxy Watch 6 with me here, but if I did and I laid it next to this, the Watch 7, you probably wouldn't recognize the difference between them right away. And so this is par for the course, really, for Samsung, at least for the last few years. It's stuck to a very similar design for its Galaxy watches, at least the main ones. It has obviously changed. The Classic line or Ultra or Pro, some of those other models have definitely changed over time, over the years, but these ones have largely stayed the same. And it's a design that works. I mean, it's the same sort of aluminum body. You get the same IP68 protection, so dust and water protection. 5 ATM waterproofing, so it is a watch you can swim with even in salt water. Just be careful though, because you can really only submerge it down to 50 meters for 10 minutes. So not really a watch for diving, but you're fine snorkeling. So nothing's really changed there. It is an active watch, so if you are an outdoors person, you can certainly take this with you. But if you want something more rugged and robust, I definitely recommend the Watch Ultra as an alternative. A couple of things that have changed on the inside are better dual band GPS inside. So this is good if you're in a forested area or a denser urban environment and you want to keep, you want the tracking to be accurate and stick with you. You'll get a better lock in this case compared to the previous watches. The other thing too, which I really like, is that Samsung doubled the internal storage. So now you get 32 gigs of internal storage here as opposed to 16. That is huge, particularly for downloading apps and for storing offline music for services that work on the watch. So if you're thinking Spotify, YouTube Music, those types of things, you can store music offline and listen to them through your headphones or earbuds without the phone. All good. So a couple of things I wanted to point out here. One big one is energy score. So this is a newer feature that basically aggregates everything that you do and comes up with a score. So it could be how your sleep, your activity, everything basically that you do while you're awake and while asleep, and comes up with a score that this is a little different than your readiness to work out. It's really more about sort of a holistic take on where you stand from a health perspective. Of course, look, you can't take it as medical advice, but if there's something that seems off in the metrics that it's providing, then it might be, maybe it might be time to get a second opinion maybe. What I like about it is that it definitely informs you when you're not active enough. And I do appreciate that. It is something that even on the app, so if you're looking at this information on Samsung Health, you will notice some details. I like also that there's explainers. So there are, Samsung will include information to explain what all these things are and why they're important, which I think is great, because when you see metrics like these, you want to get a sense of, are you in the right zone? Are you too low, too high, things like that. There are explanations for all those things, which is great. So as before, you do have ECG, and in Canada, the blood pressure monitor works as well. Note that the ECG and BPM only work with Samsung phones, though. So if you are paired with a different Android phone, you won't be able to use those two features. The watch works, sorry about that. The watch works perfectly fine with any Android phone. So you don't need a Samsung device to get the most out of this watch necessarily. I recognize that obviously if you're losing out on those two features, you may be losing out on things that you really need, but everything else pretty much works the same way. So ECG and BPM, unfortunately, still proprietary. Google Maps is not. So Google Maps works just fine on here, just like it would on any other Android watch. This is another interesting new one here. So AGEs are advanced glycation end products, and the idea here is to measure metabolic health. So AGEs are compounds that form from fat and protein molecules when fat and protein molecules are oxidized by sugar molecules. In other words, it's trying to gauge the biological aging process, and it is doing it based on diet and lifestyle primarily, but of course, the watch can only do this based on what it knows. So if you're manually inputting what you're eating and things like that, or how much water you're drinking, it could affect the score. This is a somewhat of a beta feature, so I take what it says with somewhat of a grain of salt. I do like that Samsung explains the feature a little more and what it means and what it's supposed to be doing, but at the same time, it may not be fully polished yet, just based on the fact that for it to read what it needs to read, it also needs to know more about what it is you're doing. Now, at the same time, the baseline, I think, is interesting because if it's high, there may be a reason why it's high, just on its own, right? So that's something to think about. I mean, like here it is, just to explain sort of what I'm talking about, right? And so if we go to settings, right? Okay, measurement, yeah. So that's on. So features like that are interesting because they at least are trying to glean some insight, right? It's kind of like the sleep quality where there's snore detection. So that feature returns if you use your paired phone to listen while you sleep, it will detect how much snoring you're, how much you're snoring, and in case there are any breathing abnormalities in the process as well. So I would be cautious to say that there's sleep apnea detection here, but there certainly is something close to it, simply because if there's something off about your breathing, then it'll tell you that something's off about your breathing. So if we're looking at exercising, which of course you might be scared into doing, a lot of this is the same, right? So you're looking at least about 100 different exercises that you can add or that you can track. About 7 of them will track automatically for you. The others you have to input manually or start and stop manually. So nothing's really changed there. That's largely the same. I didn't really notice anything uniquely different in the way that the watch is tracking exercise related to the previous, at least the Galaxy 6 for sure, Galaxy Watch 6 for sure. If you want to add tiles, now this is another, I like this because this is a way for you to add a tile that is also specific to an app, right? So if it's all trails or Google Assistant, the calculator, Calm, and on and on. I mean, you get the picture. Basically, there is a way to populate the watch with tiles that you need or are going to use, even if they're not specific to Samsung's own apps, for example. This is not entirely new, but I do like the way it's laid out because it's easy to understand and figure out on your own. You don't need to know the watch that well to do it. Okay, so with all that said, battery life is one of those things that is not really going to change at all, in fact. So what you got with the Galaxy Watch 6 is what you're going to get with this as well. That, I mean, if you're using GPS, and especially if you have the always-on display, you will probably not make it a full day. But if you leave always-on display off and you're using GPS, you're tracking it all the time, you could probably cross a day. You might, on very moderate usage, get to 2 days. Either way, though, expect to charge this thing fairly often, at least 2 or 3 times a week, so that way you can get through it. But that's just how it is. Samsung's never been a battery stalwart in any stretch of the imagination with its wearables, and that remains the case with this. I'm just going to shortly summarize. You do not need to upgrade to the Watch 7 from the Watch 6 unless you are one of those who has had a lot of trouble in getting location or route data if you are going on a run in the forest, or you've had trouble with location or just locking something in when you're in a denser urban environment. Maybe then you might want to justify it, but otherwise, a lot of the things here are also available there. Don't forget that some of the updates or some of the features that are in here are now available also in the Watch 6 through software updates. So there's a lot of symmetry between these two devices, and that's why it's mainly an iterative update. And that's my review of the Samsung Galaxy Watch 7, available at Best Buy now. You can read more about it by just clicking that link below. For the Best Buy blog, I'm Teddy K. Thanks for watching.